We had some news items that we already had our writers back in the writers' room collected up for us. Here's some of them. While they are vital and center stage, that means at which time during the period that they are vital and center stage, all human activities are on an equal footing, although in a manner that is not easily described to the audience. Handled insensitively or inattentively, info with an edge to it can cut clumsy cows. The body is a creature of habit, the mind a victim of habit. As long as men believe that this life is a form of some kind of punishment, what need is there for effort? The ordinary, this is a definition, news item definition, which is always in order. The ordinary, men on mentally fixed incomes. You can't get news like this just everywhere. Exceptions, irregularities, and anomalies are to the nonpartisan mind as raisins are to raisin bread. One example of life's onboard ergonomics, its built-in efficiency, is in letting individual birds sing a slight variation of the flock's collective theme as they unresistingly fly and die. There's a long item here having to do with pygmies, which, well, let me read part of it in case we don't get around to it, just the lead part. Some of these, well, some of you guys know since you pull off, but some of them it's like the major lead item to the news story, and then there'll be some sort of minor details, sidebars, human interest, or in this case, pygmy interest, cow interest, blue jay interest. But this one says, of course, this may, nobody marked it, this may have come off that, what do you guys, the metaphor news machine. So some of these I don't know whether it's literally a news item or not. But at any rate, it says, pygmies long to find giants on whose shoulders to stand. They will not, however, in the meantime, let such an interest keep them from climbing atop other pygmies. Did somebody mumble, thank God? All right, whoever said that, stand up. Oh, you are standing. Sorry. Well, in fact, it says that there is a corollary to this. It says a pissed midget is a happy midget. He's smiling. A man who thinks, perhaps, may live to think again, or he may never live to think at all. When cattle don't care to hear the ingredients of some of their foodstuffs listed impartially, they'll say, well, it's easy to be critical. The relative development of creatures can be determined. It can be measured. This is a scientific, by the way, news item. It's not one of these human interest things. But the relative development of creatures can be measured and determined on this basis, by how many means of communication they employ. I know many of us enjoy at least a little hard scientific news thrown in with the rest of this. And from one view, it is hard to be an individual without being insulting And parallelly, it's hard to be part of the collective without being insulted. Well, where to start? Where to start? How long can you stall by just looking thoughtful? Is this an auction? Would somebody guess? Somebody said 20 years. I think that's a good start. Now, can we build it up more into the realm of reality? How about let's start at 60? All right, might as well start with a nice, potentially disruptive one. During the times when they are vital and center stage, all of human activities are on equal footing, but in a manner not easily described to the audience. If we were ordinary audience considering this, then it is out of hand, point blank, right in your face, untrue. I mean, it can't be true. You cannot be civilized and believe that, because that would say that men waging war against other men is on an equal footing with men going to their next door neighbor and attempting to do humanitarian work. Which there was it was on our animal news thing about a gopher that went out to try to do charitable work among a cow herd. Well, I believe it said that if a gopher would attempt to go out and do charitable good works amongst a cow herd, then such a gopher has the makings of a saint or of a smooshed gopher. I believe is the way it went. But of course, that's just a fable and has nothing to do with serious stuff like us, like people. So back to people. The sane and the civilized would have to say, I'll go ahead and speak for them, that cannot be true, that some sort of near obscene, cynical comment from somebody, wherever this news item came from. But consider if you started seeing all of human activity and what goes on as being a transfer of energy, which it is. And no matter how, after the fact, how questionable, how uncivilized, how immoral, whatever negative term would seem appropriate to any group, that after the fact, such as warfare, that seems to be a terrible thing. But you understand at the time, if you can list the ingredients of what you eat intellectually at all impartially and not go, well, it's easy to be critical. Remember, that was having to do with cattle, and I'm sure none of you would fit that classification. Those involved with the warfare at the time do not see it as being a questionable act. Those that begin the warfare see it, or they're led to see it by their head cow, their leader, that we must attack our fellow man, the people across the border, which by that time they're not really our fellow man. They're at least one step below human development. They're one step less than civilized, or they would not offer this threat. So at least they come over and drag us down to their pissant level. We must, for the sake of goodness, charity, and all that is holy, decent, righteous, civilized, we must attack them first. I'm not just being funny. If you were there, although many of you, times are changing a bit, have not lived through an actual warfare and the kind of mass collective feeling that is not mass hysteria after the fact as psychology loves to describe it, or those of a different political persuasion after the unpleasantness. But at the time, it is not simply mass hysteria. It is not some kind of mass delusion. If you're there part of the collective, you've got no choice. It's mass nothing, unless you want to call it mass goodness, mass righteousness, that we are going to, according to the king, the leader. We have got to attack the people across here because of what they represent. They represent a devaluation of the human experience. They stand in the way of progress. They are a direct threat. So if you're on that side, what you're doing is admirable. But by the same token, you're the people on the other side. And forget the details after the fact, the way history records it, because if you remember, there was a news item, you can take it several ways. It was actually describing predictions, but you can reverse it and say that history are predictions after a car wreck, which is another version, if you remember the one from a few nights ago. So forget the historical finger pointing. But if you were the side being attacked at that time and you were there, and your king, your ruler, rallied you, they're coming over. They're on the cliffs now. They'll be attacking us across the river tomorrow. Everybody gather up or we'll be run over by these barbarians. It is vital. It is center stage. There is nothing questionable about it. Again, from their side, it's, if nothing else, it is a fight for survival. The king can say, do we deserve to die? And there you stand. Do you? No. I mean, they're over there claiming that we're their enemy, that we're going to attack them. Did you have any plans to attack them? And you go, no. And he said, well, look what they're going to do. Get your pots and pans, a butcher knife, a pointed toe shoe, but get ready, they're coming over. We got to fight. That is potentially, if you're ordinary, enough of a disruptive example to fit this. But as long as they are vital, any of you who have access to a dictionary, if you'd like to consider it, well, you can figure it out. The full, or a fuller ramification of vital, what it means. But as long as the activity going on is vital, and as long as it is center stage, not to necessarily humanity, because even world wars, as they used to call them, didn't engage the whole world. But for the people involved, if what's going on is vital and center stage, then whatever's going on is on an equal footing with everything else. That is, the people attacking Group A attacking Group B, their activity is on the same level as Group B's, or even Group C. If you could see it, they might be staying aside and saying, wait a minute, you guys shouldn't do this. Both of you are in the wrong. I thought we agreed we weren't going to fight over this kind of thing anymore. It doesn't matter what element is put into it, at that time, to the people involved on whichever side, wherever they are, even people who are not interested, if it's brought to their attention. As long as it appears to be vital and center stage to them, then whatever's going on with them is on an equal footing with everything else going on. But, it says, all of this happens in a manner not easily described to the audience. That is, you could not tell the people at the time, you could not tell Group A, hey, I understand you're going to attack Group B tomorrow. Oh, yes, we are. They're going to fight you back. Well, we expected some resistance. Did you know that what they're going to do is on an equal footing? As far as you can think, is on an absolute equal footing with what you're doing? You should hope that they're not already drinking and armed, or they're probably going to figure that you are a fifth columnist and cut you, because they can't see it. Even after the fact, historically, the last part still holds true when it says all of this occurs in a manner not easily described to the audience. Those afterwards studying it. If you tried to tell them, hey, what happened is not what happened. They say, well, you obviously didn't major in history. Or you obviously are not dependent upon history to make a living. And you say it was all on equal footing because what you assumed happened is not what actually happened. It is not, I think even news items can engage in understatement, that it is not, that is, all this happening on equal footing is not something that can be easily described to an audience. To the people involved, as long as you're thinking with ordinary mind, at the time involved, it cannot be described, which is the understatement in case my dramatic sarcasm didn't take. You cannot tell two people fighting. You cannot tell you, if you're ordinary, weighing the pros and cons of whatever. And you seem to think, well, I am in favor of plan A. I'm in favor of life operating in X manner. And something in you goes, boy, I wish I could get away from that. You cannot see that they are all on an equal footing, because if you're ordinary, back to playing this game of having it both ways, if you could do that and you're ordinary, you'd go into brain lock. You could not think anymore. So you cannot make such a description to your audience. You can't decide, well, I should be thinking so-and-so. I should be more religious. God, in fact, I don't want to be religious anymore, but Jesus, I feel guilty by not going to church or mass or temple. It bothers me. And an ordinary mind cannot see, well, hey, be bothered. Who cares? Being bothered is being alive intellectually at the herd level. Come on, you're just trying to rationalize. You see? There is no way out. So it is not easily described to an audience, even at the only useful level, even at the level of the audience being you, because who cares what everybody else thinks, right? That was to try to get us out of that news item. Because if you take it as being, well, it's not, all of this is not easily described to an audience, understatement doesn't really, understatement's understated. Because you know that's not true. You can't state it to an audience. And if you could, so what? It's only here that it matters, to understand that everything you ever thought, rather than feeling guilty, rather than feeling shame, rather than feeling any chagrin, what you should be ashamed of is still being civilized but once. It's only having that one mind, not what it does, because if you think it's civilized and it should do better, there is no doubt you are a dyed-in-the-wool, irreversible member of the collective. You still believe that there is some remedial effort possible with that first mind, with that first stage of civilization, that first stage of intellectual maturity. And if you believe that, really, you're a fine person. Probably make a good neighbor. There was another news item about that even amongst the collective, so that if we had any here, that so if they didn't think that the whole world, according to all these news items of late, were weighed against, that the world's weighted against them, it pointed out that even amongst the collective, right up at the end, there's going to be at least one treat. I mean, one final treat right at the very end. It's going to be a nice surprise for them. See, because, you got to listen good now, because they think right up to the very end, right up just that last moment, they think that life is some kind of test. You alert people, you're supposed to fill in the rest like, well, what's the surprise? What's the treat right then? Just at least a few seconds. If they lived a life of shame, guilt, remorse, standing on one foot and then the other and can't ever get in the bathroom, just back and forth. No. But even those people, in the final, assuming they don't die just like that, which is kind of spooky, that they have a few seconds. I mean, even if they're barreling down the highway and here comes a tractor trailer, right head on at them at 90, and you got just a few seconds. At least that. Let's assume that the guides will favor you with that. At least in those last few seconds, there is one treat that everybody gets. And you're supposed to figure out from that news item. See, because up until then, everybody believes that life, hey, this is some kind of test. I know. The body is a creature of habit, the mind a victim of same. Is this too obvious to go into? Nah. Because people still fight it. You're wired up to fight it. That is the collective way. As for all cows, it's why they don't like to hear themselves described. It's why everybody takes anything that sounds like criticism personally. And the more they are collectively civilized, the touchier they are. Well, we've been through this, but if you notice, you still fall for it. And even if you're getting good enough to apparently affect your behavior, you fall for it in private. You don't fool me. I hope you don't fool you. The body, people will take it. See, intellectually, you are collectively wired up, the collective intelligence of man, to believe that I am in some way free. The whole thing, and it does not have to still rest on any sort of religious basis of freedom of will. It simply has to do with anybody who is sane and collective on this planet believes that they are something other than a robot, that there is something other than some kind of genetic hardwired program. You have got to. Got to. So we settle that. Now that the midgets and the children have left the room, are laying down on their pallets, now we can try and talk seriously. of course, understanding that what we mean by seriously, not gravely. The body is a creature of habit. You would get ordinary people readily, well, a few minutes if they're sane, to agree to that. In fact, the more that the body is a creature of habit, just generally speaking, the better off you are. The better off you are. But, why think about it? It's sort of the inverse, assuming that you're genetically, fairly, physically all right. If you're not, hey, I'm sorry. Everybody, somebody got a nose, somebody got, pancreatic, get rid of it before it's too late. We all have problems. Everybody's going to die, and et cetera. Some people are even going to have to move to Michigan before they die. So. In the widest possible sense, to be a creature of habit physically, to go ahead for the sake of conversation and talk about man as though he's mind and body, and two separate things which a collective holler, no, he is not, which is another story indeed, but they still are hollering that after 5,000 years. One of the first things that Adam said to Eve, after he said, you got any cigarettes? Well, man wanted to relax. You mean you don't have a color TV here? One of the first things that humans said after they could talk was one of them stood up and says, do you realize that we got a mind? And the other person said, yeah. And he said, we got a body? Yeah. And both of them just immediately said, wait a minute. And they looked at each other and says, hey, but it's not some kind of dichotomy. It's not that there's some division between the mind and the body. Now, they said that, so you think that's something new. They've been saying that for 6,000 years, which is a whole other story. It's not. It's the same damn story, but I picked out another news item. In the widest possible sense, you are healthier to speak as though they were absolute separate, enough to speak of. The body, if you are a creature of habit physically, and again, taking into account, notwithstanding that you have your own physical shortcomings, limitations, some illness, genetically we'll assume, that you are not every night stabbing yourself in the head with an ice pick, which I guess you would call some kind of behavioral problem or induced, some kind of behavioral induced discomfort. But other than that, everything else notwithstanding, everything else being equal physically, if you're a creature of habit, the better off you are. And that, of course, flies in the face of people going around that will run a quarter of a mile and then stop and reach in their backpack or their pocket and pull out a thing and take their temperature. Or as soon as they say in an article, you may be dying of a brand new illness you've never heard of, and they say, give me that magazine. So that's not being a creature of habit. If you are healthy enough, which is however healthy you are, and you're sane enough, the thing is, it's sort of like leave the body the hell alone. Literally. Not that if you had a broken leg, don't go get it fixed. Maybe you got an uncle or somebody that used to, change tires, and he may know how to do it and save you a few bucks. But, maybe you should see about it. But other than that, to say that the body is a creature of habit, as that news item says, is in no wise questionable. It is in every wise, if you follow, admirable. It is the proper course of action. You cannot improve on the body up to a certain point if you're sane, et cetera, notwithstanding all the other possible anomalies that ordinary people experience. The body is a creature of habit. That's when it works most efficiently. But the mind is a victim of same. You could get ordinary people to agree to that. The more at the collective level, if they are educated, sophisticated, et cetera, it'd be easier to get their agreement momentarily. That they would say, you're right. To fall into same old thought patterns, to let the mind just become a victim of habit is not good. I agree to that. In fact, I've always said that. You can check with my wife. I've always said that. That was a little free humor on the few of you. The better you get, you don't have to push sarcasm or cynicism and then have to say, I don't really mean that, because the better you get, it's just there. It's not sarcasm and cynicism. That's like laughing at irony until you realize there's no such thing as irony. There's only such things as dumb people that go, God damn, I didn't expect that to happen. It's like cows staying on a railroad track. Trains coming in both directions. On a desert that you can see like 8 miles. And suddenly a cow looks up. The train's been blowing their whistle. They've got 2 or 3 marching bands on top of the train playing. They're ringing irony. This is what ordinary intelligence calls irony. And the cow suddenly looks up, and there's a train, a foot in front of them, and they think, how ironic that this will happen to me. And of course, if they were illiterate, they could be sort of sarcastic about it just before. Why not? If you're about to turn into a hamburger, you can be sarcastic if you want to. Back to where we were. You could get ordinary people. I just wanted you to see what I was pointing at. You can get them to agree to this second part, that yes, being just intellectually a creature of habit is not good. Well, pardon my French, but balderdash. I mean just balderdash. Because all you got to do, you don't have to check with cows or other people. Just check right into the Brain Motel. Yeah. What is the nature of ordinary thought? Is this a contest? Yes, let's play like it is. Well, what is it? Can you give me a hint? All right, it starts with an H. Haven Hill? No. Harvey's Bristol Cream? No. Heineken's? No. How about habit? So you got to think. Literature, all the way from Shakespeare to the Bible, to the Upanishads, to comic strips, is a continual pointing out, a continual kind of social, if not literary, if not religious, criticism of people from a news item lately. People's minds running on autopilot. That people just almost stagger through life. Because all you got to do is see that the body, in fact, works most efficiently, all things considered, all things given, all things that notwithstanding. The body works best if run on autopilot. If left alone, just let it run. Don't fool with it. Don't be telling your body, wait a minute. I think that you could process bile much more efficiently if you would listen to me. You're going to make your liver have a nervous breakdown. You'll put it into therapy. And they say the same thing about the mind. Literature is full of it, you must know it. It's all the way from, apparently, mystical, religious areas into, I'm sure today, general halls of psychiatry will say that a man just shouldn't let his mind just run on and on, just the same stuff over and over. They might want to charge you $80 an hour to tell you this finally. You shouldn't do that. I'm sure you've got some grudge, Mr. X, about the way your mother treated you. But let's face facts. She's been dead how long now? 30 years. And you're how old? 62. Well, maybe, and you say that you think about it all the time when she broke that little battleship that your uncle gave you for your 7th birthday. She says, I hate war toys, and she threw it down the floor and stepped on it. And you say you think about that at least once an hour now for 62 years, yeah? Well, you've been my patient now, and you've always paid on time. You've been in analysis how long with me now? 17 years, all right. Well, and you say you're dying, yes? Well, I feel like I owe you something. Let me tell you, maybe you should just try not to think about this so much. I bring all that up on the basis that what this is saying is humans ordinary intelligence will deny that this is true, but then their behavior is always not trying to prove that I'm correct. Life proves that it's correct. They just don't like to hear their home address given out. Well, they don't find it of any great interest. And if they find it of any interest at all, they think, well, you're picking on where I live. That's not funny. I'm pointing out that they will, under certain conditions, operate as though they're telling themselves, and of course each other primarily, is you should not let your mind run automatically, because it will. If you don't exercise some intelligence, as I'm sure you have. All of this is, if I may quote myself, an extreme, or at least an exemplary form of balderdash. People do not, and all you got to do is check yourself again, people have no constant awareness. They don't have anything even resembling constant awareness. They don't have anything in the same league. They don't have anything in the same universe as constant awareness over the fact that the mind is habit. And they will, as they're supposed to, they will dance back and forth on a foot to another foot and say, well, there is that propensity. Well, yes, you can. Or it is possible under extreme conditions, people who are not mentally stable, or people who have had traumatic experiences, or it's back and forth. But as far as you getting a person, an ordinary person, they cannot do it. It's not because they're dumb, it's because of the way they're wired up with that part of the brain. To get them to see that the mind, your mind, why don't we just get down to it, sir? Would you like to talk about what you eat, where you live? Of course they don't, but I'll go ahead with this. Your mind is as much a victim of habit, as much a creature of habit as your liver is. And of course they have got to say no. They're not faking it. Just check you. Is you attempting to read out to a disinterested, or you to read out to some cattle, a cow? Just impartially. Would you like to hear the ingredients of what you're eating? And maybe the cow doesn't know what to say yet. And it goes, well, go ahead. And you start just reading the ingredients off the label. They've never read it before. They didn't even know there was a label, and you begin to read it out. You won't get far, and they're going, hey. It's easy to be critical. What are you, some kind of smart aleck? They'll take it personally. It's the same thing as giving out their home address. Nobody wants to hear what they're eating. Nobody's mind, it simply cannot. It cannot hear what it is. And even if it begins to, even if you start reading out the ingredients, even if you start describing the cows, giving out their home address, they're going, no, I didn't know that's what we were going to talk about. Somewhere in there, the point is they're going to begin to dig in their little feet. No. You're reading the wrong label. You're making this up. Or, it's one of the news items tonight, sort of covered it in a wider, less specific way. That if you begin to read out the ingredients in some cow's food to them, they will very shortly go, well, it's easy to be critical. Think about it. That if we're using this parable, or fable, since we're including a cow, that the news item said if you start reading out impartially reading out the ingredients, which of course, if you see, you don't have to list, or you don't have to include the modifier unless you're just left that shipwreck. You don't have to cling to it and say impartially, because what kind of nut would try if you picked up a jar of mayonnaise and somebody standing next to you said, I left my glasses at home, would you read me the top ingredients here in this mayonnaise jar, the calories and the servings and the fat and et cetera. And the person said, well, certainly. And they say, servings per container, 12, calories, 17 per serving, fat, 0.7 or whatever it is. And suddenly the person go, well, there's no need to be a smartass about it. Huh? You understand? To read out the ingredients in something, just ordinarily, that wasn't the point to lose. It's a long sentence, I know. But hell, it's a long night. How else could you read the ingredients other than impartially unless you were crazy and tried to make it sound like 17 calories? What? So if somebody's reading out the ingredients in a food, now think about it. They're just reading it out. But I threw in, or the news item threw in impartially. But if cows, if you say, would you like for me to read the ingredients on this? And they didn't know there's any ingredients listed anywhere. They didn't know. Did any of the children wake up? We're not talking about cows and food. We're talking about intellect and what people think. You understand that, don't you? Is this kid, is that midget's kid laying up here? So if you get a cow, and it doesn't know that the ingredients are listed, it doesn't know it's available anywhere. What the hell do you think this is? What do you think this machine's putting out? It's listing the ingredients and giving out everyone's home address. That's all it is. So if in some way you got a cow, and it's standing there and it's listening, and you began to read out, and it didn't know it was available, never heard of it, and you began to impartially, if I must throw that in, read out the ingredients. You won't get far, and the cows are going to say, well, anybody can be critical. One more time, think about it. Think about it. The reason I went through all the thing about mayonnaise and a blind person is then, if you were just a little bit, if you're just ordinarily intelligent and could listen with a third ear, you got to realize, well, that's stupid. That's insane. What would drive a cow? What would drive a human if you started reading the ingredients off the mayonnaise jar and suddenly go, well, anybody can be critical. Let's assume there's some validity to that. You would have to ask yourself, figuratively speaking, what in the hell is going on? Why would somebody take the ingredients? Why would they say, because they heard somebody else read out the ingredients? Or they begin to say, well, I know where you live. And they begin to read your street, or tell you your street address. And it was correct. And you go, wait a minute. Jesus, everybody can be critical. And you think, how the hell can somebody's address be critical? How the hell can the fat content be critical? There's something else involved, is there not? You know what's involved? Is they have to be critical. Because what you're doing is saying your brain is living off bile, blood, urine, sweat. Now, are you talking to me? What I look like, some kind of animal? I went to college. The collective intelligence of man has to take any form. Of course, this is just between us because you can't talk about this. But any form of objective, impartial listing of what it eats, where it lives, what it's up to, must take it, in the sense we mean it around here, personally. That is, they must take certain umbrage. They'll get pissed about it. Hey, don't be telling me, hey, I don't eat that. What's right here on the label? You're the one that handed it to me. Is this not your brain? Well, yes. You may be reading out the ingredients, but I hear the way you're doing it. I mean, anybody can be critical. I ask you one more time. How can you say fat, 17 grams? Oh, wait a minute. Or how can you say, all right, 417 West Chestnut, apartment. No, wait a minute. Hey, I didn't know he was going to be some kind of smart aleck about it. I didn't know he was going to be critical. It is the kind of ultimate defense. It is the built-in defense. The ordinary mind, as long as it's breathing, will take anything that begins to resemble an unauthorized description of itself, a non-standard reading of the ingredients of what it eats, which would be any reading impartially. I went through that thing about impartially. There's a constant reading, quote, reading of the ingredients of what people eat from an institutional bias level, which is what all religion is. It's what all institutional operations are. But religion, again, being the great example, is you go somewhere and they read you the ingredients, not from what you're doing, not from the jar in your head, but from something else, which is what makes it work. Yes, we're going to read the ingredients of what is man. And you think, good, I'm in the right place. And then when you really know you're in the right place is when they reach under the counter and they pull out a Koran, a Bible, any kind of book, a cereal box. As long as they don't pull out your brain, as long as they don't pull out your billfold and look at your address, as long as they pull out something extrinsic to you and say, all right, we're going to read the ingredients of man. You go, all right, I'll steel myself, I'll bite the old bullet, and I'll chew on every other cliche I can think of. And you say, go ahead, Rabbi, tell me, minister, tell me, great one. And they'll say, man is a lowly creature. And people go, I love it, I love it. Because they're not reading out impartially the ingredients of what you are. Man is a terribly shameful, wasteful rascal. Oh, boy, I'm glad I found this place. They don't take that critical. Does anybody take that critical? If they do, they got them leave and they just forget about it. It becomes irrelevant to them. But they come back for it. And it's not because they're dumb, and it's not because they're masochists. But they do not take what would appear to be on another level, if you're following, what would appear to be direct, undiluted criticism. That you go and you pay your money, it may become the big part of your life to go, you're part of a religion, and you go once a week or more to hear somebody go, and they read the ingredients of man, not you personally, so that you can't take it personally. I mean, you're not intended to take it personally. They don't say, hey, you're the person who screwed up everything. I mean, some guy with a funny suit, for those of you that didn't get that, there was a news item that said that anybody dressed in a silly suit that approaches you from the general direction of the collective, from a funny suit, they're dressed funny to start with, but if they come from the collective, you can be sure of this, the business they got to do with you is deadly serious. In case anybody couldn't fit that together, does it sound more? At any rate, you do not have to take the criticism of religion or even morality, social mores, the weight of civilization. You don't have to take it personally. That is, individually. You don't have to take it personally individually, because the priest or a rabbi, the religion, any institution is not going to single you out and say, you're the one, not Adam, not Eve, you. Disregarding the chronological trouble you would have with that, but they don't single and say, you're the one who screwed up everything for the rest of us. You're the one that the gods have got it in for. Uh-uh. They read from a book that simply says, what it amounts to, the herd ran amok, the sins of the fathers, etc. And so then you're all right. Because as long as you feel like this life is some kind of punishment, you don't have to make any effort. What the hell good is it? What can I do? But consider that from another view, what I want you, or from a better view, you would think that should be where men are most defensive. That you would go to this beautiful building, like a great church or a temple, synagogue somewhere, and go in there and everybody's quiet and they're playing, Bach, nice music, and the sun and all that coming through the windows. And then somebody gets up, and you put in a little money, you went to the trouble to come there, and it's been kind of entertaining up to then, a beautiful choir singing, and suddenly a guy comes out in a funny suit, and he begins to do what? More or less give man hell. How come people do not stand up? They go, wait a minute, I came for this. Hell, my nose is too big, I'm overweight, I can't afford a new car. I already find life, somewhat annoying at times. And I got dressed up on my day off. I came down here, I put money in the plate, I sat here for this. That's what I'm doing? And you're telling me that I'm no good. I came here for this. To hear you dressed up in a funny suit, looking funnier than I look, to tell me man is no good. No, the point being, people do not take that personally. Cows do not. People do not stand up and say, hey, anybody can be critical. But, notice, if, under those same conditions, a priest or a rabbi or somebody, which is not going to happen, but under institutional conditions, collective conditions, that a man got up, or a woman, you understand, and began to describe the ingredients of what the audience is eating. to begin to describe where intellectually people live. Then you would have all these fine dressed up people. The audience would begin to stand up and take extreme umbrage. They would begin to say, hey, anybody can be critical. You notice the humor, the built-in beauty of it. It is only when, from the kind of view of somebody would be interested in getting the most fun they could out of their own brain while they're alive, from that kind of view, that would only be, the only thing that would interest them would be the very kind of thing that at first would make them go, boy, I sure don't like hearing that. But then they'd feel like, if they were the right kind of thinker, is how that weather report, as an independent thinker, will, of his own volition and own purpose, get out and chase tornadoes. Because as soon as somebody who had that kind of would-be independence of mind, as soon as they realize, hey, I don't like this, they'd think, boy, I like this. Not for the rest of their life, because then that's an easy step to go from that to becoming a professional masochist in the psychological victimization religious sense. So you can't stay there. I don't mean the rest of your life. You can, keep talking about how bad people are, how stupid. Yeah, I love it. That's only good for a few minutes. What the hell you want? You know, it's like smoking a little grass for the first once or twice. Well, it was great fun, but after that you got to, kind of face up to it. The third or fourth time, there's no comparison. Jack Daniel's delicious the first time or two, even being drunk. It seems to be fun once or twice when you're 17 maybe. So it's not that you stay there forever, but you do understand, I assume, what I'm saying, that you can hear the ingredients of man, not just from me, but you begin to hear or to see it yourself, the ingredients in the food that people eat intellectually. And you don't take it personally, because you realize that's true. There's nothing critical about it. But you also understand, if I was talking to my old self, I would be raising hell. And of course, you can't do it, because if your old, ordinary first stage of intellectualized, civilized thinking was in operation, you couldn't even get that far to talk to it. You would already have slammed the door on it. It would have already no. Or just said, you're nuts, you're crazy, you're being too critical. Show me where this is. Who said that? What institution? What great thinker ever said that? Well, no great thinkers, right here on the ingredients. You find me a famous philosopher, a religious teacher, a guru. You find me some group of people, some organization, some institution that ever said that, and maybe I'll consider it. Well, nobody ever said it. It's just here on the ingredients. You got to find me. You got to find me some kind of widespread proof. What kind of proof? It's your street address. Who said it is? Well, do you live there or not? Maybe, but who said I do? Well, I'm just trying to direct your street address. Yeah. Do me a favor. Yeah. Now, I know what you're up to. What? Well, I know. The body is a creature of habit, the mind a victim of same. The ordinary, the news item definition of the night, the ordinary, men on mentally fixed incomes, which they're supposed to be. Second part of the item says, well, I guess that would mean that the independent-minded have got to be the world's biggest spendthrifts. Several short ways to look at that. Being on a fixed income, of course, this news item lifted that right out of the everyday news. We all know what that is. People like retired people or people disabled, people that's got some fixed income, they cannot work or they cannot change their income. Let's say it's a 70-year-old crippled person, house-ridden. So they're on a fixed income. The government, somebody, an insurance company, an annuity, they're on a fixed income. No room to move around. They got it down to where they can pay the rent and eat and et cetera, but nothing unexpected can come up. They cannot buy an extra six-pack for the Super Bowl Sunday They can't get any sicker than they are now. They can't afford it. We all know the everyday news items and the difficulties of people being on fixed income. But intellectually, the ordinary do not see being mentally on a fixed income as being anything less than, they don't, of course, ever think about it, but they would not see it as being in any way a drawback. Contraire Bessie. For those of you in other country, there was a news item. Bessie is a favored name for female bovines. Being on a fixed income is sanity. Being on a fixed income is not having to make any effort. Being on a fixed income, literally, if you're mature the first time, been civilized the first time, and you're an ordinary person, being on a fixed income is sanity, stability, predictability, comfort, ease. It's being able, who has to be born here? All right, never mind, we won't. So nobody asked. So here you are, and you got 60 or 70 years to put up with this crap. For the first 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, you think, boy, this is going to be a great adventure because I'm going to end up playing center field with the Cards, back when there was the Cards. The Mets. I'll end up playing quarterback. I'll end up being a princess and marry a quarterback or whatever girls dream of nowadays. But then after 11 or 12, 15 years old, you realize, I ain't ever going to be a quarterback. I ain't ever going to be a princess. My nose is not even going to get smaller like my mother used to say. Oh, you'll grow out of it. It got bigger. So then you realize, hey, I'm stuck here for another 60 years. I got to put up with this. So, life, being the big-hearted rascal that it is, has arranged things in such a way that you are then put on a fixed income. It appears to have some kind of social connection, some kind of behavioral, some kind of environmental, such as the great classic examples, as always, suddenly a man or a woman finds themselves with a couple of children, they're 20 years old, they're in debt, they're not ever going to finish school, they're not going to probably get any better job than they have now, working in a car wash, laying carpet, teaching school, that this is it. My big breakthrough is going to come, if I ever get a $50 a year raise. Yeah, that's it. But notice, once you're on a fixed income, it's almost a kind of relief. Even though a man or a woman can stand at a bar or with friends and say, boy, I wish I'd never gotten pregnant. I wish I'd never got fooling around with that guy when I was 19. I got no business here with 2 kids, living here in a housing project. I'm stuck with him. I put on so much weight now after all those pregnancies, I couldn't leave him. I couldn't do any better than him. I should have never done it. They say that, and yet, as some of you know, as all of you know who can think, there is a kind of first level, civilized safety, comfort in that. Like, I'm on a fixed income, what the hell can I do? Well, what you can do in a sense is, I can now sort of take a nap, go on autopilot for the next 55 years, and slip right into the great crypt and get out of here. So, the ordinary, the definition, men on mentally fixed incomes. You understand? That is not some teeth gnasher. It's not for people to go, oh, boy, being picked on again. No, people enjoy that. And then the other part was, so, it says, I guess that would lead the independent mind as being the world's greatest, biggest spendthrift. It would have to be the news item I'm interpreting, the independent minded, is someone who is not satisfied to be on a fixed income, somebody who is not afraid of jumping off a cliff, somebody who is simply so dissatisfied with thinking the same thing over and over and over, eating the same food over and over and over, although it is safe. And although, at the ordinary level, you have already come to the conclusion, it seems, that, hey, life is not really going anywhere. There's some kind of trick. This is punishment. It's a test. And there's nothing I can do. As long as you think that, you're right. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you're supposed to do. No effort's required. Slide. Jump on the back of your fellow man. Jump on the back of yourself. Jump on the back of your sister, your husband, your wife, your mother. And it's like this long 60-year-old not miles, 60-year-old hill, snow-covered, and you can jump on somebody, if only yourself, if only the collective intelligence of man, instead of a sled, slide on them for 60 years. No effort required. Why would anybody make an effort? Once you realize I'm on a fixed income, I'm always on the verge, on the edge of starving, being thrown out, but never quite. So I'm going to be like this 60 years. Okay. But at least I don't have to do anything. Hey, Martha, bring me a beer. Change the channel while you're up. There it is. The independent-minded would be a spendthrift. And for one thing, we're running out of time, but you got to understand, spending that which you don't even have, which is the only thing that makes it work. Because you have to go past the point of I'm on a fixed income. What have I been telling you? There's no way to change that mind. That is like trying to work some kind of remedial magic on your mind. It's on a fixed income. That's it. You'll never be able to feed more money into it. And so you got to be a spendthrift. You got to be able to ignore that. And then all thoughts become, do you remember the one about everything is on an equal footing? To be a spendthrift is not to hoard anything and say, wait a minute, now I got one great thought. Well, at least I know one thing for sure. You're back hoarding. You're a damn chipmunk laying on a couch turning into a chipmunk potato. You're the one hollering, Herbert, bring me a beer. And you change the channel. You got to spend that which you don't have.